Hello everybody. I'm here today joined by Max Kent from PSL in order to discuss probably the most overused term in the world today, which is sustainability. How does sustainability apply to the supply chain, how it impacts finance and procurement transformation programs, and what it is that Max is offering as a solution which can help with carbon tracking. Before we do that, Max, would you like to just introduce yourself to the audience?
Hi there, yes. Thanks, Michael. So Max Kent, PSL. PSL, when we started the company, stood for Procurement and Services, but we've updated that to Procurement and Sustainability. The L stands for Limited, so that's slightly less exciting. But really what we're doing is looking at procurement and finance departments and working with the data that they provide. But what we really do is take a human approach to that and work with the people within those departments so that they understand exactly what sustainability means, what the data that they're working with, particularly in the AP department, which we work really closely. We've got Jamie here as well, so work very closely with the AP Association because the data that comes through accounts payable is absolutely critical for driving sustainability. The finance team is absolutely critical for driving sustainability, and so is procurement. So really it's taking that message out there is our challenge and our mission.
Okay. And we are indeed joined by Jamie Radford again, CEO and founder of the Accounts Payable Association, and we'll be bringing Jamie in on one or two of the questions here. But for the rest of us, would you ever just mind explaining to me the whole carbon reporting scope 1, 2, 3, 4 situation so that, give me the bluffer's guide, would you?
Okay, so there's a lot going on around this. I think what's happened is in the last 3 years, the government have released something called SECR, which is an update of the previous supply chain carbon emissions reporting that we're asking for. So SECR stands for Streamlined Emissions Carbon Reporting, and they've split that over 3 scopes. So scope 1 is your business travel. Scope 2 is your purchased energy and utilities usage. So they're the kind of internal energy and emissions that you'd have within a business. Scope 3 is actually your purchased goods and services, so your supply chain downstream emissions. What businesses fail to realise is that 80 to 90% on average of a business's emissions is in its supply chain. So most businesses will have changed the light bulbs to LED. They might have put biomass boilers or ground source heat pumps in their organisations and think that that's enough, but probably it affects 5%, 10% of their total emissions. So actually where we come in is looking at, again, back to that procurement data that comes via the invoices, the AP process, and looking at where that expenditure is and the companies that they're dealing with. So really, I think that gives it in a nutshell, but really, sorry.
As we look across scope 1, 2, and 3, I think there's a purchase or a payment involved in every part of it. So I have here beside me a man who is literally Mr. Accounts Payable for the UK. Which element has the responsibility for tracking all this and producing carbon reporting? Is it the procurement team, or is it more into the AP team, or is it finally the true evolution of purchase to pay, and it's a combination of the two?
I think you're absolutely right. It's certainly both departments, and most of the business needs to understand the part they play in this. Mm-hmm. It's all about understanding where they're making the purchase, so procurement's definitely got a part to play in this, probably the key role where they are starting to understand that their role isn't just about working with the supply chain, working with cost, working with onboarding of suppliers and management. It's about reducing the emissions, so looking at how many deliveries to site are being made, looking at the ESG policies of those suppliers, making that available to the rest of the business, so when they make a purchasing decision, they can see that information about that supplier and be having an informed choice whether they make that purchase with that supplier or whether procurement have put a new supplier in front of them that is more sustainable or more environmentally friendly.
Okay, so as me sat in the middle as a finance director, am I logically going to my head of procurement or my financial controller and getting this information out of the AP ledgers, or am I getting it out of the procurement system?
If it exists in the procurement system, then that's where you're going to get it from. But it depends what systems are in place to look at this. So what you also need is an intensity ratio for every single supplier you've got.
Okay.
Now, an intensity ratio for every pound that a business produces in its service or goods, there's a correlation of carbon emissions to that pound.
Okay.
If you multiply the two into a ratio, that gives you how intensive that production is. So if you then took that ratio, which is what we do in our trackers and our tools, there's different ways of calculating that. There's no one scientific approach to calculate the intensity ratio for a business. No, so it's very new in its calculations. So there's no global standard for this. There's no central database.
So you're sitting here telling me that the world has gone mad to deliver sustainability and we don't have a global standard for the intensity ratio?
No, absolutely not. If you go on to someone like Amazon Business's website, they've got full pages of how they've calculated their intensity ratio, how they're working to reduce it. Go to another business, they've got nothing about it at all, and they don't even know when you speak to them about it. So when you hold this in a system, what we're doing is multiplying expenditure of that particular business, of how much they spent with that supplier, against their intensity ratio, and that gives you the carbon emissions.
So is there an element of, do we work out our own intensity ratio? Are we self-certifying this? How does this work?
So there's various ways to do it. A lot of it's based on industry averages. If you don't have... If the business itself hasn't looked inward and calculated it itself, that is based on everything that business is doing. All of it, its whole organisation gives you that one intensity figure. Whether that business has looked at it or not is a totally different question. So some have, they've really focused on it, and you get more accurate data from those businesses. So when you put this in front of the customer themselves and they look from top to bottom at their emissions, and they can see the highest, what they're going to do then is actually talk to those suppliers about what they're trying to do to reduce their emissions overall and how that affects them. So they'll vote with their feet, really. If they're not looking to see, if they can't see how that supplier is reducing their emissions for them, they're going to vote with their feet and choose somewhere else. And I think that's where the change will really happen, because they'll lose business.
So the analysis then, I suppose from a business perspective, I look at what we're spending, and I obviously want to spend a little less and still get more bang for my buck. So spend analysis is important to me. This is an extension of spend analysis to tell me the intensity ratio associated with everything I bought and from whom. So it's no longer a simple decision of, I now want to get the same product the cheapest. I now have to get the best value for money on the product whilst bearing in mind the intensity ratio, which would seem to be a challenge, I would say, on the data analysis side in order to achieve this.
It is.
What are you seeing with your members in attempting to address this? It seems relatively complex in terms of the requirements.
Well, let's just start back at the basics, the data. The data is the biggest challenge. Most organisations have challenges getting the basic data out. So when it comes to this sort of analysis, Max, you work with our members also, running our quality programme, data analysis and pulling data from, whether it's from the payables ledger, from the procurement data, the master vendor, the supplier, surely that is a challenge from the start. Would you agree?
Absolutely, yeah. So it starts with vendor master data, getting that one source of the truth, cleansing that data, having it accurate is absolutely the key to it. If you don't start in the right place, everything else that comes from that will be incorrect. So
let me, because I hear this an awful lot when we start off transformation programs, and everybody complains about the data, and I have to listen to the whole garbage in, garbage out. But put it in perspective. What's involved in cleansing a vendor master file?
So when you think about onboarding suppliers and the amount of purchases that get done, that grows exponentially with the size of the business. So if you think of a business that's maybe 150 million turnover, they may have 7,000 to 10,000 suppliers they're working with. 20% of that will be the top 10, 20 suppliers they're spending most of the money with, and the rest of it will be a tail of one-off purchases and suppliers that one of the end users, one of the people in the business may not have been able to find the right product and just gone off and raised the purchase order, found that supplier online. And procurement a lot of the time working at contract level, strategic level, so they don't really challenge the onboarding. So that just grows and grows. So that you've got this tail of suppliers that just grows. And then when they're raising the purchase orders, people may just enter that detail incorrectly. So you end up with different spellings of suppliers, different versions of that supplier. One might have limited, might not. Cleansing that means that you need one record for every supplier. So it's a must that every supplier has one record, not 10 or 20. So that's the cleansing, deduplicating, removing the errors.
Removing the duplicates. What about the quality of the data that's contained within it itself?
So it just depends how that's been entered. So at some point, when businesses are implementing purchase-to-pay systems or supplier onboarding tools, all of that technology is crucial for managing this. So businesses that are doing this manually, are probably going to have to start looking at technology. Businesses that are already on that journey have to look at how good is the data they've put into this, and is there an amnesty period where they literally stop and say, let's cleanse and start from here, because unless we do that, everything that follows that is going to be incorrect.
Okay, so it's pretty critical to get the initial building block correct for this.
Absolutely.
Given the extent of your membership, how seriously do you think that most finance functions are taking vendor management, vendor maintenance, as opposed to passing it off on the procurement team?
Yeah,
the legendary tail.
The tail, this whole Pareto, the 80-20 rule. If you look at the basics in the payables world, supplier statement reconciliation, for example, most organisations do it by value, not volume. So they'll look at the biggest value suppliers and reconcile those suppliers, which is, to one respect, they're looking at some of the risk that's contained in there. But I'm sure you'll agree, from your procurement background, Max, and mine personally as well, the risk is actually in the tail. It's where the smaller suppliers, where they maybe not onboarded them correctly in an efficient manner, they may not be checking those suppliers on a regular basis. That's where the risk is. So what we are finding with our members is that it's now coming to light. There are more challenges in that sort of that tail. So they are starting to adopt onboarding suppliers in an automated fashion. They realise the value is in that smaller supply chain, and they also understand the risk. And we're not going to go down that rabbit hole of fraud and risk today, but absolutely, as in the transformation world, why wait until something's happened? Why don't you be proactive in the steps that you take to try and avoid that risk? And this is where you come into play, Michael. This is what you do. This is why you're coming in. If you're a transformation project manager leading a project, yours is all about reducing risk, making a business more effective, not waiting till the frauds happen until you make those changes. And that's where I would say that a lot of our businesses, especially through that horrible period of COVID, working from different environments, have really valued the systems, the solutions, the people and the training, and are actually working on those areas now where we've seen a big rise in the amount of people valuing that supply, that vendor master data is so important in our world now.
Yes. Our initial building block to down transformation is to know exactly where we stand at the moment.
Yes.
So all of the data that we possess, be it for the vendor or for the customer or for product, does need to be, I suppose, validated, reviewed and verified, cleansed being the right word. But for people, what I find with an awful lot of, say, medium-sized businesses, they've never engaged in this activity. And practically all of the businesses I encounter who are engaged in a long-term multi-year transformation program, they never set up and structured their master data correctly in the first place. So they're faced with, we need to do it now. And then they invariably look at me and we go, we've 90,000 suppliers, so it must be a massive job. Is it? What's actually involved?
It's data cleansing work. There's lots of tools out there that we use and other people use to do this. You've got some very, very clever people on the data cleansing side out there that we work with and others work with out there, that it depends on the volume and the size, as you say, but it's not a hugely complicated job because it's about having the right tools and processes in place to do it. So as long as there's a specialist involved to do that job or they understand what their objective is, then it's not too much of an onerous task. I think there's a perception that it is because it's a big volume of data.
Yes, actually I would totally agree with you. Whenever I'm talking to finance leaders, they perceive that numbers, volumes, equate to difficulty. Well, 80% of it could be right. So therefore, it's not a difficulty. Whereas the actual risk within it, and as you alluded to earlier, if we don't have this tightened up and verified, there's your risk straight away before we get into how can you actually defraud the business. Well, this was my first step in attempting to do that. So we want to cut that out. I think it's useful to put right across the membership base that maybe, to be honest, there should almost be a little project which goes, everybody should cleanse their vendor master file. We'll all get to a certain stage. But moving on from that, so we've taken the vendor master file, we've cleansed it, we've got something that's validated and robust. We want to do the carbon reporting. Am I looking to the left-hand side of the house to AP to do it for me? Or am I coming back to the procurement side? As I listened to what you said earlier, I'm beginning to think maybe it's a combination of both. How do you go about it?
I think it's absolutely both. So again, Jamie talked about the fact that we run the quality program in conjunction with the APA. The reason for that is because it's so crucial of where that data comes from, seeing the quality that goes through in those departments and the hard work that gets put in. that is where the data is held. So with the teams we've already engaged with on that, they hold that data, they hold the keys to it, and they see what's coming through from the procurement teams. The communication and the relationship between P2P teams and procurement and then back to AP needs to be strengthened to make this. And again, that's a real crusade for me to make sure that that is linked. I think there's probably a disconnect between those two departments that's been in the past. When you speak to AP about procurement, there's probably sometimes a bit of a sigh and a bit of a animosity. That needs to change. They need to work together, and the teams and the businesses that are getting this right are the ones where they're really aligned and they're really working together.
It's interesting because I first came across the concept of an end-to-end finance process when I worked for Deloitte about 20 years ago. And these phrases coined, purchase to pay, P2P, and then you go into an organization and you tell them this is the best practice approach. You need an end-to-end process and you need a global process owner. And then you step into those organizations and you take a look at this is the AP team and this is how it's viewed, as Jamie eloquently described earlier. And then you look at the procurement team and you see how this is viewed, and the two of them are viewed differently. And they aren't in any way managed by the one person in any organization. And the bulk of them, they're not.
Yeah, look, and I think what Max alluded to is that communication and collaboration are the most crucial parts of the end-to-end process. The reality is they've both got very distinct parts to play in the end-to-end process, but very rarely do they sit around a table and work out what both can offer to each other. So the communication and collaboration is so critical, and it's in the order to cash area, but the procure to pay area, and also understanding what the procure to pay process means. So you can explain what a GPO is, a global process owner is, and the value of that role, but then does everybody in both sides of that process understand the true benefit of that process and what they can do to collaborate. A lot of organisations we work with absolutely understand their siloed little part. Everything to the left, everything to the right. Why does it bother me? I'm only interested in the part that I do. You have to collaborate and you have to communicate, and what that leads to is better processes, better trained people, and ultimately then world-class finance functions. That's what we're looking for.
And like the interesting part for me, because I always say that there are certain symptoms to an organisation which doesn't work, which brings the conversation back to what we were discussing with Mark earlier, and that change comes down to people and the emotional aspect of it. When I see that somebody has gone and put in a global process owner network, be it in P2P, order to cash, or R2R, that for me is the number one symptom that the two teams don't talk to one another. And then you create this role of global process owner and you give them no accountability because neither the AP team nor the procurement team reports to this individual. You have actually managed to institutionalize inefficiency in creating this. They either report to them, it works, or they sit there as some on-the-shoulder angel expert, and neither of the two teams have to listen to them. So I always, red flag for me when I see that, we're going to start a transformation program and we're immediately hiring the global process owners. It's like, right, so you've already just, prepared for failure, basically, would be my view. Coming back to the subject that we're talking about here in the carbon reporting, you have a solution, you have a tool?
Yeah.
Do you want to give us a little bit of an overview?
Yeah, absolutely. So we start with procurement spend analytics. So crucially, it's that expenditure data from AP into a system. Ideally, we work with ERP solutions or AP automation tools. What we ideally want is lines in the cloud. So that's line item data up in a cloud database. So it's fast and efficient. And then we produce bespoke spend analytics because what we're focused on is working with people and a consultative view of working with them to drive change and drive results. Then we've got tools to support that. So we're not a tech-focused company. It's not a tech solution where we want to just drop that and leave the customers to work it out. We bespoke those solutions so that it's the right reporting for them. So we work in a really niche way with each business needs slightly different reporting. They need to see slightly different things. We're very used to that. We come from a software background as well as procurement. So we know how to template solutions, but we really want to bespoke. So it's unique to that organization. Gives them the data they want to see. They look at their spend, look at their suppliers, get the vendor master list, and then we add that intensity ratio component to it so they can actually track the supply chain against that expenditure. So that's the solution and the tech side of it. But what we put around that is that accountability. So I've got a procurement background. So what we obviously go in is with the customer, we sit with them on a regular basis to look at that report and give them proactive insights into how they should be using it, train them on the tools, provide more training for their end users, provide more insight into which suppliers they should be looking at and which data they should be pulling from those reports so that they actually drive results with it. So we're really focused on the success and driving that success with each organisation.
Okay, there's an interesting point there I'm going to come back to in just a minute. Do you actually think that AP teams get involved enough in analysing the output of their process? I'm not talking a number of invoices, I'm talking about where we spent all the money. Do you think they have the interest in knowing and understanding what the business is buying?
Two questions there, I think, Michael. So the first, I'll answer the second part first. So they definitely have an interest.
Yeah.
It's whether they have the time and the capability to do this with the data they have. So there's always an interest. So I would absolutely say the skill set, the training, the ability's there. It's the capability with the tools they have. But also, if you look at the process and where that collaboration, where we talked a second ago, there's a desire and need. And I listened to the chap earlier about the behavioural aspects of how you make change. This is the same thing. This is a behavioural issue. This is, has the leadership clearly defined what we're trying to achieve here? And is everybody aligned to that end goal? If not, then we're never going to win. So the way I look at this ultimately is, has AP got the responsibility? Absolutely they don't. Have they got the desire, the passion, the need, because they want to understand the value they bring to their organisation? Absolutely. And you've got to mix those two up. But you have to have some real clear leadership about what the end goal is. And that comes from behaviour, culture, all the good stuff that's there, but it's got to be driven from those organisations, those people.
That's interesting. So, I mean, I look at it, when I go into most organisations that haven't been transformed, I can guarantee you not one of them has done proper spend analysis. Right? And I'll listen to all the excuses under the sun. We've no PO system, can't get the approvers to do this. They engage in the rabbit wheel, you know what I mean, of getting the job done. They don't get enough helicopter view time to step back and go, well, where did we just spend all the money? Should we be spending all the money? Do we actually possess line item detail to analyse this to drive out savings? Do we have the time for that? The AP side of the house doesn't have the time for that. It actually has a job to do. It is a production factory at the end of the day to get X amount of volume produced. So I look at that and I want, or X amount of volume processed. I look at that and I go, both sides of the house would benefit immensely if the information or the data was available to drive intelligent conversations. Because actually in all of the companies that I've gone into, they use AP as an entry-level position before they start moving potentially younger graduates around the business, come in, look at AP. Anybody with an inquisitive mind would read the invoices. Where did we just start spending the money? I can guarantee you they read the employee expenses to see where the bosses are spending the money. So you can build a picture and a view of a business if you have an inquisitive mind through the door that you open for them. But for all of that team to be able to contribute the knowledge that's in its head, it requires a tool so that we can all easily see the summary of the results very, very quickly. So, not being the world's most patient transformation project manager, if we were looking at your carbon reporting tool and the spend analytics that comes with it, what's a typical implementation timescale?
So we use Power BI for the main platform. The reasons for doing that is it's a Microsoft product that everyone's familiar with the layout of.
Yeah. We
can build very intuitive dashboards. We've got experts that build those for us that have been doing it a long time. We can deploy it within 4 weeks. So we can get that tool up and running. It's pretty cost effective. We really work with organisations to get the tool in place and then build from there, drive those insights and drive that accountability. But Power BI is the base platform for it because it's something that everyone can use. They're used to using it. We're used to deploying it on systems. There's less training that's needed with that. It's less expensive for organisations to take on. So
you tailor the output of it?
Absolutely.
Because my entire experience when I walk into an organisation and they tell me they have a Power BI team, I'm like, right, great, you're going to just dump something in front of me that you put no thought into, and that I then need to analyse again before I can hand to somebody of any importance.
Yeah.
You cut that out.
Yeah, I think I'm the same. When I hear that, when we present this and people say, "Well, we've got Power BI in house, we can do this ourselves." There's miles apart from getting an expert who is a data analyst, a business intelligence expert, to build correct dashboards, multiple data sources from multiple ERPs, merging all that together, being able to build the filters and things like that. That is a very expert level job. So they may have that expertise in house. But do they really know how to work with that kind of data? And is it the best use of their time? Probably not. When you've got templated solutions that we then bespoke, it's a far faster job. So like I said, 4 weeks, we can have that up and running. They can have a set of bespoke dashboards and reports that really gives that insight into where they're spending the money, where their issues are with carbon emissions, and how they can work with that data to actually reduce that and get solutions out of it. So it's not just about having a nice looking dashboard that they can put in front of people and say, look how good or bad we're doing. It's what's the actual outcome of this and how do we drive results.
Okay, so one of the interesting things you mentioned there, accountability. So we've all seen software solutions, and we all listen to the same argument that what you put into it is going to be what you're going to get out of it if you're looking for results. I don't think I've ever come across anybody who's then tagged on the accountability piece and gone, right, so the software supplier is going to make me accountable? How do you do that?
So again, it's that people focus. We are a consultative business first and foremost. So our real objective is to work with people and business and organisations to take them towards a more sustainably operating business. And that may mean that they're dealing with more local suppliers. It might mean they're dealing with more carbon efficient suppliers. It might mean that they're spending less money and conserving resource. But all of that is within the reports, but the report is just a means to an end. So we're not focused on selling licenses and selling software tech. We really want to work with organisations to drive results. So that's the accountability. So
and how do you do that part? So obviously I've taken on the software, we've implemented it over 4 to 5 weeks. I get my reports and I do what most people will do. We'll go with the 2 months worth of the pandemic instructions, and then in the third month we'll go, I'm not reading this now.
And that's absolutely the problem. So with all of those tools, and we've all been there, where you've been given a set of reports or you've been given software that does a great thing for the business. ERP tools have got lots of reporting anyway, but you have to actually go into them to get something out, and you have to know what you're looking for to get any meaningful results out of it. We have looked at this from a starting point to say, well, we need to drive results. What is the worst thing that could happen is people pick up our software, 3 months later they drop it because they've gone, it looks great, but we didn't have the time to do anything with it, so we didn't get any results from it. So for us, we go in on a quarterly basis, probably more regularly at the start, to make sure that they're trained to use it, they understand how to use the software, and then they're looking for the actual results that they need to drive within that tool. So we sit with them to make sure they're using it, make sure that they're getting the right results out of it, and then follow up with them on a regular basis to make sure that they are actually achieving those.
Okay. And how critical is your own procurement background knowledge to this?
It's massively important, because I think if you came from just a data and reporting background, you would see the results just like they would, but you wouldn't really know how to interpret them.
So are you challenging me? So I get this report every month, and I've seen where my scope emissions are, and I've seen who they're with. Are you looking under the bonnet with this and driving me towards making actual changes in my supply chain so that I take different suppliers?
Absolutely. So we've got a module we're building now called Proactive Insights. So that's working with the teams to say, okay, if your supplier hits a certain emission threshold, the tool will actually ping an email to you to say, here's something you should look at because you've set that criteria. Now, we've built that in the review process anyway, so we understand what the objectives are, but the tool is now going to tell you to look in it. So you don't have to go, right, I need to actually remind myself to go into this Power BI tool to look for something that I'm trying to find. It's going to tell me because I've already set that. Now it's hit that threshold, we need to speak to that supplier, we need to do something about it. So the tool will hold you to account as well through that review process, which is more critical than whether it's Power BI or another platform or any of those pieces. They're all just a means to an end. So it's that review process and that accountability that holds the whole thing together. So that's the most important thing of all.
So did you want to come in on that one?
Yeah, no, I think the reality is it's software. And Max isn't here to sell software. Max is to sell a result, an end result. And I think what you're picking up very clearly, Michael, is that it's about how you drive the results and what the end is. What's in it for me?
Yeah.
And the reality is, everybody in that end-to-end process needs to understand the critical parts they play and ultimately the end goal they're trying to achieve. What's in it for me? So yeah, it could be Power BI. It's the solution is irrelevant.
Yeah.
It's what you drive, which is that end goal you're trying to achieve.
Okay, so you put it across, you've almost convinced me. I didn't know scope 1, 2 or 3 before we started, and I do like the accountability angle. So to wrap up, I want to come back to the whole end-to-end process piece. What can we do to actually create the seamless, unified management of the P2P process in organizations? What can we do to move towards that?
Well, look, we mentioned earlier, we have a quality program in the APA. It's called the APAQ, and that is driven all around best practice and continuous improvements. Let's be honest, in the world of financial transformation, that's exactly what you're trying to do. You're trying to improve something. And let's be honest, you're normally brought in because something's not going right, or something needs to be improved. So the continuous improvement part for us is so important. Now, Max has took on the mantra of running that program for us. So actually what that does, through a series of modules and series of elements, it practices in prods an organisation's development. So we're very much talking about procure to pay, but actually what it does, it shows you a benchmark status where they are today. But if they want to improve, well, they've got to go through a transformation. Whether that's a full end-to-end transformation, parts or whatever. So what we're trying to do for the industry that we serve, the payables industry, is try and set benchmarks. What does good look like? What can we try and achieve? But actually you then need people to go and help these organisations, and I think Max alluded to earlier, it's the experts, the people with the knowledge, the people with the wider scope. People have worked for lots of organisations rather than their own sole organisations. That's where the challenge is. You've got to bring the expertise in, and actually then, when you start to improve, celebrate the success. Show that the things are improving. Show organisations, show people what good looks like and where you're trying to get to. And it's not a finish, there's no finish to it. There's an end goal, but you're working towards it, but it's a constant moving feast.
Very good, very well put. Any closing remarks, Max?
Yeah, absolutely right. From just to add to what Jamie said there, it's all about the people focus. About this isn't a sales process. This isn't about going and selling software. This is about recognising the hard work that departments put in, developing them, and making them understand the challenges they face within the AP team. It's empowering them and evolving their knowledge on sustainability and making sure that they understand the part they play in it, and then taking that to the wider business. So when we come across businesses that say we want to get to net zero by 2030, and then you look and their eyes glaze over and they say, but we've got no idea how to get there, this is where it all starts.
Okay, right. And I think on that note, we will wrap up. Ladies and gentlemen, Max Kent, PSL,
Thank you
Jamie
very much.
Radford, CEO of the Accounts Payable Association. Sustainability.